Your call has been placed in conference.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Jessica Tormey with President Cross's office. I know there's going to be a large group of stakeholders on the phone. We're going to wait until right around 1 o'clock to get started, and if everyone who's currently on the line could please press mute, we're very grateful. Thank you so much, and we'll be with you in just a moment.
I like how it's spontaneous.
Good afternoon. Again, this is Jessica Tormey with President Cross's office. President Cross will be joining us in just a few seconds here. This is going to be a large teleconference, and so we respectfully ask everyone to be very careful on muting of their phones. Thank you so much. We'll be right with you.
Hello?
Hello?
Are there other people in this conference now? Are we waiting to start?
I'm not sure. This is Terry Wood.
I'm here.
Just give it one moment, folks. Again, this is Jessica Tormey with President Cross's office. We've got a lot of stakeholders joining. President Cross will be with you in just a moment, and we'll go ahead and get started in about 30 seconds. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking time to do this and being patient with me for a minute or two. I've been on, obviously, the phone with a number of reporters for a couple of hours, so I'll try not to act like I'm responding to a reporter. As you know, I'm proposing to restructure UW Colleges and Extension, so the UW Colleges will become branch campuses of four-year institutions within a regional STAR model. Cooperative Extension, including the conference center operations, will be aligned with the state's land-grant institution at Madison. Other divisions of UW Extension, business and entrepreneurship, broadcasting and media innovations, et cetera, and continuing ed, their CEOEL, will come under the system operations because they really aren't aligned with a single campus, but both serve and receive assistance from a number of campuses. These changes will be effective though probably not fully completed by July 1 of 2018. This gives us several months to work on the implementation process to make sure we're treating everyone fairly, properly, and equitably. So there are no restructuring changes, none, to the colleges or extension prior to that. That this will have to continue for the rest of this year, and as we prepare to change. So, is Kathy Chancellor Sandeen? Have you joined us on this call?
She's just finishing up another call, and then she'll be on.
Okay. When she arrives, Katie, would you let me know? Or,
yep, absolutely.
Because I want her to join me in this process. So, from our perspective, there are really four key pieces of this. The big driver is that, I don't have to tell all of you this, the changing demographics in Wisconsin. The growth in our population, 90-some% of it is all over 65. And most of the time, when I look around, I see too many people that look like me, and that's pretty scary. Very few, I think in the next 30 years, we're only expected to increase population from the age of 18 to 64 by about 15,000 or so people. That's amazing. And comparably, the 65 or older is something like 700,000 people. So it's just it's a disproportionate thing. Further, that could all of you mute your phone for a few minutes? Furthermore, the rural populations are shrinking as the 18 to 64-year-olds that live there are moving to urban environments. So it's a convolution of different activities that are putting pressure on this. So maintaining these campuses as a university presence in these communities is incredibly important to us and to these communities, even as they go through these stressful demographic shifts. So that's important, and maintaining access and affordability. So one of the pieces of this is we're maintaining our tuition differential levels. So these are access ports to the university, and that's really important, even as the coursework on those campuses migrates to be the same coursework as the receiving institution. So there are several key things, and then of course improving transfer pathways. That's critical to us, and standardizing and building on what the colleges and extension have already done to regionalize and consolidate operations and administrative services. That's going to be elevated to the next level in this effort with this kind of approach to putting these institutions together. So I think Kathy has joined us, Chancellor Sandeen has joined us now, and we'll open this up for questions in a little bit, but I thought, Kathy, if you've joined us by now, do you want to weigh in on this?
Sure, of course. Hi everyone. It's nice to be on this call. So as I've been saying in a lot of the conversations that I've had today, and I don't know how many, a couple dozen, that while I was always the biggest cheerleader for the UW colleges and their mission, at the same time in my mind I was enormously concerned about their financial and future sustainability. And then when we saw these dramatic population shifts within the state of Wisconsin, all Rust Belt states have experienced this, and all of a sudden we're, experiencing the wave as well. It had such a dramatic impact on our enrollments. And so I am 100% behind this new plan because I believe that it will provide that stability for the UW colleges. President Cross has stated, and I have been quoting him all over the place that we will not be closing any campuses, and that is something that really weighed heavily on the minds of our faculty, staff, our students, and the communities where we exist. I myself am a first-generation college graduate, and I live and breathe access and opportunity, and keeping the doors open in these campuses, in these smaller communities. I think this is an important thing for the University of Wisconsin. And so this new structure allows that to happen. And, again, Ray talked about some of the other positive aspects of it, the seamless transfer that I hope that we can, really embody. We need to do a better job in the state of Wisconsin. And also the possibility over time of offering bachelor's degrees in these smaller communities. That is really exciting. So I am really honored, and my team is honored to be asked to, really take a leadership role in this transition as we go forward. It's a quick one. There's a lot that we need to do, but we're confident that we will be able to get the job done. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and look forward to working with all of you over the next, months or so as we pull this together.
So before I go on here, I want to thank Kathy publicly, and Chancellor Sandeen has done, and her team have done a marvelous job of trying to adjust her institutions to these, not only these changing demographics, but obviously the changing revenue streams. She's done a marvelous job of doing that, and I want to thank her publicly. But this effort to lead change that she has done already can help us while we're maintaining quality and making this work, given the experiences that she's had. So this whole effort will build on what she's already done with her operation, and obviously we want her to play a key leadership role in helping us make this change. So she's and her team are heavily involved in this and doing a wonderful job. And I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that. I'm going to jump to a couple of additional points, and then I'll move on. We are all committed to making this work, and we're going to put a resolution in front of the board for their support. This needs board approval at the November board meeting, and we will do everything we can to answer your questions. We also have a web page set up that's called it's gouwsa.edu/restructure feedback, and we'll try to find all kinds of mechanisms so that's out there. So if you have specific detailed questions or you have broad questions, please feel free to share those on that web page, and we will do our best to get you an answer quickly. Unfortunately, there are a number of things we won't have answers to until we've completed the implementation plan, and even then we'll probably have some issues that will be hanging out there. But that's what these next few months are for, and we're having to do all that while we continue to effectively serve and recruit students, and that's it's a really important aspect. So with that, I'll open it up for some questions, and please make sure you share your name. I might recognize several of you, but please share your name and go ahead with your questions. Any questions?
I have a question. I'm Jacob Schimmel, the president at UW-La Crosse Student Association. I guess my question is just for the restructuring. Are the two-year colleges going to be essentially a branch of a parent campus, which would be that four-year institution, or are they simply going to be managed by the four-year and still keep their essentially status as a two-year campus individually?
They will be branch campuses of a parent campus. In some cases, chancellors have said there will be no home campuses. They will be treated as a campus of a regional university. The idea being that this moniker, this is, I'll take Oshkosh for instance, this is UW Oshkosh at Menasha or Fond du Lac. So these will be elements of the parent institution. Is that what you're looking for, Jacob?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess just, what is that going to look like in terms of, I guess, integration between the two? One of the things we talk about as students is segregated fees. Obviously, we had that restructuring. Is that something that's kind of just going to be mushed kind of together, or are things still going to be kept separate to a degree?
I think those kinds of things principally will be kept separate. We want to maintain the tuition and fees as they are. We have to for the next couple of years, I think. Not all the fees, but pretty close to that. But I believe that differential needs to be there. These are the access portals to the university, and we need to make sure that they maintain that access responsibility. These are the front doors of access. I think that's important. Kathy, anything you want to add to that?
No, nothing to add to what you said. I think you've expressed it well.
I guess I just have one more question from my end as a student. La Crosse isn't going to be impacted by this, it looks like, but from a four-year perspective, my concern would just be that is it going to be financially draining from the 4 years perspective to try to supply the support to the 2 years to try to increase enrollment and just increase the opportunities at the 2 years?
Oh, I forgot to add, we're going to take all the money from La Crosse, Jacob, and ship it. Oh, no.
Oh, shucks.
I hope you knew that was a joke.
Well, I got a decent sense of humor. I can at least take that.
I know.
It's not that funny.
Yeah, I know. Everybody's struggling for resources right now, and that's fair. But no, there's no intent to do that, and I don't think there are any incentives built into this model which would do that, other than this. We will have the implementation team, including Kathy's folks, working on how resources are to be shifted. And we have to be very careful because it's very important that this access responsibility be respected and maintained. However, if these classes in the future, let's say the college's classes at Marathon County are ultimately retitled to be equivalent of the classes at Stevens Point, its parent institution, and they're cheaper for students to take at that campus, might you see a migration from those four-year institutions to the two-year institutions because of the price differential? Perhaps, but that's one of the benefits of access, of making access important. So I think we have to consider that, but that would be helpful to students and their families for the most part.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Other questions?
This is Holly Haffel from UW Colleges, the chair of the Faculty Council. You can imagine that people have a lot of questions around what this is going to look like for our faculty in terms of a huge shift from our identity as a shared institution to now, being part of 6 different institutions. People have been asking a lot about, of course, tenure and how that's going to be managed and transferred, and I was wondering if you could speak to that. I'm getting a lot of questions about it.
Yeah, let me start with the obvious question on the table with respect to that, Holly. Tenure, existing faculty tenure has to be transferred along with years in service and years after tenure, post-tenure. Has to be transferred into the receiving institution in totality, and that has to be probably something the board will pass as a requirement. And into the right department, Holly, that may vary by, obviously, discipline. The second part of that is that faculty that are on a tenure track but are probationary, we don't know exactly how to bifurcate this in a responsible way. And
Who's going to
try
fire them? What they're going to do?
Excuse me? Okay, we don't know necessarily how to bifurcate that in a crisp way, but it looks something in my mind like this, and we will be obviously seeking counsel and advice. But if you're a faculty member that's relatively new, which criteria should you be subject to in your efforts to secure tenure? And it would seem if you're further along on that process, it would be unfair to change that. And where that point is probably something we'll work on, and we might be flexible on that. But that's something we're very careful to protect and to do it wisely. All other employees will be transferred in total, including their years in service, and the receiving institutions that I have talked with are working very hard to make sure there's a consistent level of comparable work and respect for and appreciation for making sure those employees are taken care of. And that's a broad answer. Holly, do you want to expand on that?
Well, I guess you said that, the tenure will be transferred into the right department. It might vary by discipline. I mean, what does that, one of the things that's distinct about the colleges and other institutions is, we have some, credentials and tenure requirements that are parallel to many of the comprehensives, and then other institutions like Milwaukee as an R1 that has somewhat different tenure expectations because of their research mission. And so I'm curious about how all of this is going to play out. How is it going to be negotiated? How are the departments going to be working together to, integrate the faculty into the new department? Any details you have on that would be welcome.
Yeah, I'll try to give some broad answers here. A lot of the details will be worked out with the chancellor and between you and the receiving institution and the respective faculty in those departments. But there has to be some overall principles that cannot be violated, and so that they can't come in and say, well, we're not going to give you tenure, we don't do. That's not possible. That's why I think it's important that this is a merger, and it requires that your tenure rights are respected and that they are upheld. And this is a change that's not a result of anything you've done. This is something that obviously has been forced upon us and informs through the demographic challenges we face. But we want to work very hard to make sure, and we will guarantee those tenure rights. That's really important.
Ray, this is Kathy. Just to reinforce what you're saying and what you have told me previously, is the resolution that goes up before the board will have some conditions on it, and one of those will be transferability of tenure. Did you go over that already, that process? Because I think that gives some peace of mind to the individuals who are involved.
Yeah, and I think the details of that, to Holly's point about, I wouldn't force the institution on the receiving end to say, must be in this department or something to that effect. That has to be worked out. But there are a lot of questions like that Holly will have to work out.
Thank you.
Hello, Ray. This is Mike Baldwin, Cooperative Extension, and I'm currently serving as the chair of the University Committee. Could you say a little more about the Cooperative Extension's consolidation with UW-Madison? And I can see a lot of advantages there, but how might, do you have any thoughts how that alignment, merger might take place?
Yeah, I'll try to talk about some of the principles that I think are important there, Mike. One of the things that's difficult, both with Milwaukee and with Madison, although the UW College's faculty are actually clearly teaching courses and traditional faculty, where cooperative extension employees are kind of an anomaly when it comes to how they would be transferred in. to a structure, a tenure structure that that doesn't fit that model. So there are a number of things that have been done elsewhere in the country and things that have been looked at, and we've only looked at them a little bit, Mike, but we have to guarantee your tenure in some fashion. How that looks, not sure yet, and that's something we will look at. Maybe there are two types of tenure, specifically because of that. I know one of the things that was always troubling in other states was when extension faculty were held to research standards such as at Cornell, the state of New York got really upset because they wanted extension faculty to work on issues important to New York, and they were studying the tsetse fly in South Africa or something. So my point is, how do we keep that scholarly effort that's different in college or in extension separate from the research efforts that would normally happen on a land-grant institution? We don't have all the answers to that, Mike, but we're very sensitive to that, and it leads us to say we will guarantee those tenure rights. How that plays out yet, we don't know. Is that any help at all, Mike?
Yeah, that helps, and I appreciate those comments. So, and maybe this isn't a fair question yet because there hasn't been enough time to process it, but in a lot of states, cooperative extension is sort of merged into the colleges of ag and natural resources. I'll use that term. Do you sort of envision that model, or do you envision a separate school, or within UW-Madison? Any thoughts? And maybe that's jumping ahead too far, but I'm curious about at least the options that might have been thought about so far.
Yeah, in fact, I talked to Becky last night, Chancellor Blank, and her comments were that she would intend to make this a separate school within the university. I think one of my concerns would be that it be given comparable stature to other schools, and I think that's fair, and she's indicated that she would do that. The specifics on that, though, obviously we have to work out, but I think generally what I've just described is an overall view of that. Is there anyone from Madison on the phone? So
yeah, this is Steve Smith, Secretary of the Faculty at Madison.
Hi, Steve.
And all I can do, Ray, is underline what you just said. That's what the Chancellor said on our way to the airport this morning, too.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that has to be worked out, but I believe that's the broad commitment that we do know at this point, Mike.
Okay, that's very helpful and encouraging. So I think there'll be some great opportunities to interact in ways that we haven't before. So
it's really important that I reemphasize this point. The reorganization that has gone on in colleges, which has been, it's probably a forerunner, if I can express it that way, and a foundation upon which a lot of this regional work with the colleges is going to take place. It's also true that the restructuring within Extension has to continue, and we support that strongly. It's really necessary, and I want to make sure I reinforce that, and this is not, should not be perceived as an opportunity to say, well, we're going to go back and restructure this differently. We're going to continue with that, and that commitment is strong. Other questions?
Hi, Ray. This is Matt from UWMC and UWSP. I have two questions. They're not necessarily related. One is, what do you see the role of student governance, especially with the 2 years and their parent campuses? And then my second question is kind of the role of the tertiary entities that aren't necessarily part of a campus, like WIPS and WPR.
So let me follow up with WIPS as those, what I would call those ancillary or tertiary entities. Clearly, Stevens Point will embrace that strongly and probably expand it. So I think those entities will receive the same nurture and support they've always received, maybe even more. Secondly, with respect to student governments, as you may or may not know, Matt, I believe strongly in student governance, and I don't know exactly how the college's student government at those campuses at, say, Marathon and at Marshfield Wood will fit into Stevens Point, but I know how students feel about that, and they will be welcoming that process, the process of integration, while respecting the unique needs of students at these branch campuses. And how that might be organized, I don't know yet, Matt, but I think it's a very fair question and one that requires that we all make sure that student governance on these campuses is respected, valued, maintained, and supported.
So I guess as a follow-up, do you see the two-year campuses maintaining their own student governance? Like you said in response to Jake's question, you expect the fees for the two-year universities to be separate from the four-year universities that they're a child campus to.
Yeah, I think probably the precise answer to that, a better way to respond to that is probably yet to be determined. But I think there should be some guidelines crafted around that. And if you have thoughts about, you or Jake, or some thoughts about how best that might look, I'd be interested in just hearing that. Things that might be considered as guidelines for campuses.
Yeah, this is Jacob from La Crosse again. I guess just two things on that. One, could you just, are you saying that the SEG fees are going to be yet to be determined, or are you saying that for sure they will be separate? And then I was thinking that maybe in, I guess, 2 years would have to chime in, but trying to have system put in place, some guidelines to say that it's up to the student governments to determine how they want to be organized on each respective campus, including the child campuses?
I think that's already in Chapter 36. So I think that treating the branch campuses, making sure that that's extended to them is not just the main campus is important. So yes, I would support that. Going back to the SEG fee question, for this year for sure, this current year, obviously there's not going to be SEG fee increases, and next year the SEG fees going forward in the future will be separate. The question is, how will all that play out? And I think a lot of that's unknown. But we're not trying to increase any fees or tuition as a part of this process. That's not part of the deal. Everything should remain the same. That will present some difficulties, I know, and it'll take time. It may take a couple of years before we work through all of that. But that's the intent, not to create any additional costs for students at the UW colleges.
Okay.
This is Chris Johnson with faculty with UW Colleges Online and with UW Fond du Lac. Any ideas about how this might affect split appointments and appointments with UW Colleges Online in terms of home campus and department?
That's a really good question. UW Colleges will continue. So that probably will be shared as is. The question is, will your appointment at UW Fond du Lac will be absorbed into UW Oshkosh over time? I think that's pretty clear. There's nothing that would keep you from retaining that split appointment with UW Colleges Online, assuming, of course, you're just a great faculty member, Chris.
Hope so. Thanks.
That was meant to be a little bit humorous. I think you probably are, otherwise you wouldn't be doing that. So.
And President Cross.
Hey, Ray. Chuck Cornell, UW Platteville.
Oh.
Okay, Chuck.
Hey, a couple of questions have already started making rounds here. So looking at the financial structure here, I noticed that some campuses will have no assumed extra responsibilities, whereas other campuses are going into 2 and 3. And so do we inherit their debt service, their deferred maintenance, which we're having a big issue with right now in light of the differential tuition and the idea that we're basically not going to be having revenues? It sure looks like we're barely keeping our head afloat, and we're going to be asked to float the boat over here, and it's going to drag us all under. I mean, I guess we need a little bit more information on that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I don't think there's any question that Richland Center and in particular, but perhaps Baraboo, all of us are, all of the campuses are resource strained, and that's probably most severe in the colleges because Kathy's had she's had tuition frozen within the colleges. At the end of this biennium, it will have been frozen for 10 of the last 13 years. So that's just an amazing challenge. I agree with that. Now, there's a couple of things you need to know with respect to that, Chuck. The facilities are owned by the county or city, depending, or a combination thereof. So those will not be state facilities. Now, there is a maintenance issue that they have to be responsible for. There's a piece that we're responsible for. Maybe Kathy can speak to a little bit of that, but that's true. It's also true that the resources that normally would flow to those campuses will flow to the parent campus. The question that we're trying to deal with will be obviously those support services that are required to support that and how to best maintain and make sure they work well. Kathy may have some additional comments on that. I don't know.
Kathy had to step out for another call.
Okay. So Chuck, does that, thanks Katie, Chuck, does that start answering that question?
Yeah, it sure sounds like we're going to assume some risk here. And the other half of it is, I know there's a geographical consideration here, but why were certain campuses omitted from this?
Well, there are obviously geographical considerations, transfer trends, also issues of compatibility in terms of within a region. Some of them are much more tightly connected in terms, like if you take a look at Stevens Point, Marshfield Wood, and Marathon, they're all only about 30 miles apart. Some of them are a little further, that's for sure. But there were a number of factors that we looked at in terms of how to align these.
So we're not really looking at changes in GPR allotment to help with some of these issues then?
No.
Allocation.
Well, there will be a shift in GPR that comes, the resources that would go to those campuses normally. And then there will be other things as well. So,
President Cross, this is Mike Bartlett, Dean at UW Colleges Online. Just coming back to Chris's question, and by the way, he is an outstanding faculty member. So
I figured that.
Are you able to talk to any of the details on how the transition will work, or some of the details on how UW Colleges Online will move to UW system under the umbrella of CEOEL?
I'm probably not. I'm not sure how that will work. That'll be part of the implementation process and take a little bit of time. I think going back to Chris's question, obviously the existing faculty have served that really well. Most of them are affiliated with one of the UW Colleges campuses, and resources are shared with those campuses. And we want to continue to grow that, and actually we have ideas about building that out and making it much, much stronger, and combining it with a lot of other things. So I think that if you look at the enrollment trends in UW colleges, that has grown, I think, 88% over the last 7 years.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And if you consider that, probably 95% of those students are students that are already on the UW colleges campuses. Might we expand that to serve the comprehensives and others as well? That I think is an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, thanks very much.
Hello, Ray Cross.
Hi, and this is?
Hello, here is Eric Huang, the the SPC president of UW colleges.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have two questions. So the first thing is, actually, if we are become a part of the 4-year university, then our SBA also disappeared, or also our athletic teams and our student clubs also disappeared, and we just become a part of Eau Claire?
Well, I think some of those questions have yet to be answered. What will happen to the athletic programs? Very fair question. That's, I think, something we have to look at in the implementation phase. We're already talking about how best to do something like that. Might these be Oshkosh JV teams, or I don't know, something? I have no idea. We've had some conversations with Gary Karner of the Wisconsin Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, but at this time I don't have answers to the athletic side of it. But I'd be interested in what you think would be important, because athletics play such an important role in helping students, and it's also part of the overall positive side of attending college.
Like, as you know, so you told that, like, we will maintain our campuses same as right now. So we also have the current student life. So I think we need to maintain our student government in each campuses. And also our campus, our Barron County have a basketball and volleyball team. So if we are merged to the UW Eau Claire, then it is impossible that the players go to the UW Eau Claire every day, right?
No, I think that we will have to maintain some athletic programs at Barron County. I think that's something we need to do, but I don't know exactly how that might play out. The two-year colleges have their own conference, and so how do we do that if you're part of Eau Claire in your case, or in that case? That may require some adjustments, but we want students to participate in athletics if that's desired at the campus. We want to maintain that.
So actually, I'm not making sure your answer. So are you planning to maintaining our student government and athletic groups?
Yeah, I think that's you. I want to make sure that you have the right to determine how your student government will work on each campus. That's a part of Chapter 36 in the state statutes. So I can't tell you how to structure for student government. That's something you will have to work out, and I think that you will be able to maintain that on the Fond du Lac campus or Rice Lake campus, but that's something you'll have to work out.
Oh, so it is up to the student decisions.
It's up to the students on a given campus to figure out how they'll be structured. They don't want administration telling them this is how you'll be structured, and I agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
This is Terry Worth from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I couldn't get off mute earlier. I would have spoken up, but I have actually two questions. One is I was curious if you could discuss a little bit more about transfers and kind of what the thinking is about students transferring from two-year campuses to four-year campuses, and whether there's kind of a defined path that's more preferred than others. For example, two-year school gets folded in with a particular four-year school. Is it the vision that most of those students will kind of transition to that four-year school, or will it be wide open in terms of being at a two-year school and transfer to the right four-year school? You may go to the two-year school because of a geographic preference, but the four-year campus may be desired from a program focus. So I was curious about that.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that the two-year colleges were separated years ago from the sponsoring institutions, if you will. was because they felt that it was limiting their transfer options. So they attempted to create a separate institution, and doing so would open up the transfer path so they could go anywhere they wanted to go based on the curriculum they wanted and the institution they wanted to attend once completing the 2-year program. So that was part of the thinking back then. The problem I have with that is that we have had difficulty, when I was at colleges and extension, we had difficulty making sure the receiving institution informed us of any curricular changes. So students would get there and they'd call back and say, how come I have to take this course? You didn't tell me that. And I think that being a problem, and now moving to, let's say you're taking a Platteville course at Baraboo, I think that makes the transfer easier, but in no way does it mean that you should attend Platteville, although I'm sure Chuck and others there would like that. But this has to be your choice. I do believe the Platteville courses will be more readily transferable, but there will be some of those problems, such as the one I just described, that may continue.
Okay. And then my second question is really a little bit more process or understanding the process is, in terms of this proposal, what were some of the other alternatives that were on the table instead of this path or this proposal to address these demographic trends?
Yeah, and I want to say straight up that a restructure doesn't address the demographic trends. This doesn't cause people to have more kids.
No, I know it's the consequences of the demographics, right?
I know I was being a little bit humorous, but I think it's obvious that the restructure was designed to create more flexibility and actually have campuses reach out and also streamline operations under a regional model comparable to what colleges and extension have done. So let me try to answer what alternatives were studied, looked at, examined, explored, reviewed, considered. Well, let me tick off a couple. There probably are 3 campuses within the colleges, maybe 4, that are already under the numbers that were looked at when Medford was closed. So one of the options was, which Medford was closed in 1982, and all campuses that had under 250 FTE at the time were subject to careful scrutiny. So they closed Medford. Rice Lake was in that category, and so was Richland Center at that time. So one of the options was, should we close one of these campuses or more, given the demographic trends? That was taken off the board because, for a lot of reasons, that would destroy some of these communities. And we didn't feel like we had explored all of the viable options to save those campuses. And the communities, and talking quietly with a few of those leaders, please don't lose the university presence in our community.
Right.
Secondly, we looked at, well, most states have community and technical colleges, or just community colleges that have technical programming as well. We looked at, well, should we just merge the UW colleges with the technical colleges? Is that an option? In looking at that, that would have been a complicated, lengthy process requiring legislative maneuvers. It would also have, in the words of some technical college people, diminished the role of the technical college. Now, I personally don't agree with that, but their feeling is that the liberal arts general education program starts to threaten the technical college curriculum. That's their opinion. I don't think that's true. And if that's the case, why do 95% of the states have community colleges where both of those, where the transfer programs and the technical programs coexist nicely? But that's a strong feeling here, and there would have been considerable resistance from the business community in some of those areas. So the third point was, well, Chancellor Sandine has already done a marvelous job of reducing administrative costs, trying to figure out how to best structure her campuses given the enrollment trends. Is there a way we can build on that with our regional approach, et cetera? And the more we looked at it, the more that seemed viable. So that's a little bit of background of the options we looked at and some of the reasons why we were moving in this direction.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
This is Jacob from UW La Crosse again. Just a question again, kind of about how things are going to kind of mush together. In relation to the foundations, how is that going to look? Are foundations going to be part of the parent institution, or are certain things going to change, or what is that going to look like?
Well, that's a really good question, Jacob. That really is, that probably will play out differently, but I would suggest that there are obvious ways to do some of that. Some of the two-year college foundations could become separate subunits of the foundation, the main foundation. They could be incorporated fully. There are a number of ways that could happen to respect, value, and continue the important work. Those some of them are quite small but very helpful two-year college foundations. In my opinion, there's a lot of options. I don't have an answer for that, but certainly that we want to respect and continue that.
Thanks.
Hey, Ray, this is Sean Piet from Stevens Point.
Hi.
I'm the president of student body over here. I have two questions for you. One question is, can you give more specific examples of how this kind of merger system will help save the whole system money? I've been hearing a lot of things like it'll save some resources and maybe money specifically, but I just wanted some examples to have a better idea in my head what's going on. And then a second big question. In this kind of merger process, is the idea that maybe there's some kind of political advantage that we'll be able to bring to the legislature, hoping that maybe they can give us more money in the future budget allocations, with the idea that we're starting to go through very hard conversations like this?
I'm going to be a little bit facetious on your second question, Sean. If this was only for political reasons, we wouldn't be doing it. So I don't think this will have any impact on whether or not we get more money or our ability to influence the legislature. I think they're going to come at this differently, at least for the next decade or so. So I think if I set that aside and go back to the first part of your question, where are the savings, if there are any, and how might this occur, and how would you use those savings? So let me try to deal with the administrative operations first. It's important that we standardize our processes. And let me try to explain that. We have 940 some ways that we trigger, different ways we trigger payroll action. That's ridiculous. We have to come down to 100 or so, maybe 50 even, and standardize those so we all do things the same way, because all of that has to be realigned to aggregate any kind of information. So standardizing processes and studying them and making sure that the steps are there that are actually needed is the first step in before you want to automate anything. Otherwise, you just automate garbage. So you want to automate a clean process. So when you do that, you then open up resources to do other things around that. So you can imagine if the HR payroll function is standardized, the student information system is standardized, the people doing a lot of that now putting data in 2 or 3 times, you can achieve some efficiencies by doing that regionally, and you can actually do it better and more consistently and make fewer mistakes. So I'm taking a little bit of time here because something we've been wanting to do and been working on is the consolidation of and standardization, streamlining of administrative operations that are what you would call support operations. IT, budget, HR, procurement, those things. The more money we spend on those things, the less money we spend on the classroom and the success of students. So part of the goal here is find ways to shift that. So reporters will ask me, and that's one piece of this, Sean, reporters will ask me, how much money are you going to save? Everybody wants to know how much money you're going to save. I don't know how much this will save. It will take a long time. It might take 3 or 4 years before we have a big savings, but it'll happen over time. And these kinds of transitions take time, and we want to be respectful and supportive of people and treat them fairly as we go through this. That's the least we can do. Is that helpful at all, Sean?
No, that's really helpful. And I just want to clarify on my second question. I mean no disrespect from that at all. I just wanted to see if there was maybe using this as an opportunity to gain some more support in the future from our legislature.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be trivial on that. What I was saying is I don't think that's the case. I think the legislature will look at this as a bold move. In fact, I had a reporter say to me, this seems like the biggest thing that's happened to the university since 1971. Mm-hmm. And I went, well, maybe it is. And the legislature is looking for big, bold moves, but that shouldn't be a reason for us to just do something just because they're looking for big, bold moves. It needs to be the right thing, and we need to think it through.
I'm very glad to hear that, so thank you very much.
I had a follow-up, Jacob, again. I had a follow-up question to that really quick. Just in terms of centralizing that process to make it more efficient, my just concern is what is that going to look like for employees that are currently in place? I would assume that would mean, cutting positions, to try to make things more efficient and centralized. Is that what it is looking like from your end?
Yeah, I got to be real careful about the word centralized because some of that will be regional. And so there may be activities that campus focus on, and that's their focus for the region, and some other campus has a focus for the same region, but another focus. So yes, there probably will be over time. My goodness, I don't know how many employees retire or leave over a year. The goal here is to, obviously we will have fewer people in time, but not to do that in an aggressive fashion. And there will be other things that will cause us to enrollment declines keep forcing our hand. So if we can stabilize enrollments, that will help us make these changes more wisely. If we cannot, there will be campuses. I know Stephen's point. Sean is already dealing with issues of a decline in enrollment. Obviously, it's one of the rural campuses in an area where the demographics are working against them. So I understand those things are already there. This is not going to solve those problems.
I have a question, Ray. This is Steve Benjamin.
Go ahead.
I'm going to turn my volume down here. My question for you is, are the campuses that merge going to be expected to merge their academic calendars and their curricula also?
I don't know. That'll probably have to be something that comes out of the implementation team. I would think they would, but there may be factors there that are much more bigger and complex than I can see on my surface. So I think that would have to be something that would be determined by the implementation team on the campus.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cross?
Yeah.
This is Jack Connell. I'm the chair of the University Staff Council at UW-Eau Claire. And I have a question on...
Jack, excuse me just a second. Could somebody mute their phone there? Go ahead, Jack.
My question pertains to the shared governance of university staff to your campuses. I believe that they're a statewide organization currently. So how will their representation be taken care of as these mergers go?
Yeah, I think that's another good question, Jack. So let me start out with this logic. So in Eau Claire, you will be picking up Barron County and Rice Lake. So the academic staff there will be combined into your operation, and how you make sure they're represented in your academic staff council, I think is up to you. And I would hope that, and I'm quite certain that most of the receiving institutions would give that careful thought to make sure that those folks are properly represented and taken care of. I really believe that that's the case, but we want to make sure that's true, Jack.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, hi, Ray. This is Marty Allen, UW La Crosse, Vice Chair of the Faculty Senate. And you were saying about how the GPR, the revenue given for the child campuses, will now be flowing into the host campus and then be distributed out from there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I understand your question, right? I think that's obvious, yeah.
Right. So given that different campuses in the system receive different amounts of money per student, is some part of this proposal going to equalize that, the amount of money received from system per student? Or is it going to be earmarked so that the amounts coming in, even if there are different amounts per student to the institutions, will still be earmarked to go to that specific regional campus?
So Marty raises a point that is obviously, I think probably Marty has worked in other states. Most states distribute state GPR on a per student basis. In New York, it was for every student at every 15 credits. So in Wisconsin, they have never funded colleges, any of our institutions, on the basis of per student funding. So that's always a channel and a challenge. So the GPR distribution model looks like to them, to people who look at it, oh, gee, look at this campus over here is getting more per student, and look how little we're getting. So last year, when we made an adjustment in the GPR distribution model, we looked at 6 different ways of evaluating this. And the campuses that were, in their minds, seriously underfunded per student, once you added in all of the other factors, number of grad students, and you pulled out the professional schools, the state professional schools, and you looked at things on an apples per apples basis, we found a couple of campuses, we found some campuses that did need some adjusting, and we made those adjustments. That was the basis of our GPR adjustment modeling. However, in this process, the plan is not to make any more of those, but to take the GPR and, of course, the tuition and fees that would come to the campuses that are absorbed into a parent institution. Those would directly flow there. So that's the strategy, Marty.
Okay.
President Cross, this is Alex Vernon, the student body president at UW Stout. Just wanted to hear your words on, as far as the implementation planning, if this does get approval by the Board of Regents, is there going to be a task force set up by system that includes faculty, university staff, and students on this? Or I know you mentioned that it's going to be up to individual campuses, but it sounds like there's a lot yet to be determined, which I understand you're laying out this proposal, but I would just like to know how we're going to start implementing this and where our stakeholder opinions are going to come into play and what your plan is for that.
Thanks, Alex. Alex just served me a softball. I needed to answer that question, and I had not previously, so thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
The plan to do that is that there will be a central office implementation team here, and I plan to chair that, and it'll be made up of members from Chancellor Sandine's operation and from our operation here. But Chancellor Sandine will co-lead that. She's helping me with this, and that's important. So that team will be here, Alex. And then within the receiving institutions and the associated branch campuses, there will be an implementation team that needs to be established. And I see student involvement, faculty involvement, academic staff involvement, maybe even community involvement, I don't know. But I definitely see that as a part of those regional teams. And those people will have representation or input directly into the central team. One of the things we want to be careful to do is make sure that those regions have flexibility to do things a little differently, to nuance things. We aren't trying to say every region needs to do it this way. There are some things, some guidelines, every region needs to make sure faculty tenure is sacred and that those rights are transferred. How do we treat them? All these employees are rolled over and their tenure, not tenure, but their length of service is as well. There are things we have to make sure, and those guidelines, I think, need to flow out. But we need enough room for those regions to have some flexibility to deal with some issues that might be different, and we don't want to dictate that if we can. Is that helpful, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I would just lastly like to encourage you at that system-wide task force to include maybe just one student representative from the student reps group, maybe the chair of the student reps, maybe one university staff, at least just maybe one person at the table that can assist you and provide you opinions on behalf of all of us. That would be greatly appreciated, but I certainly understand that giving their own institutions the right to do things their way. Thank you for that.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
President Cross, this is Nelo Gentu from Stout.
Hi, how are you, Nelo?
I'm good. We feel a bit left out here at Stout. I don't know. It's
no, you're being isolated as really important. That's
no, but one of the important question here is we have a lot of transfer students, and Barron County is one of our partners in this. And what would be your advice for us? We want to preserve those strong partnerships, and we don't really know how this model is going to play out. So.
Well, one of the things that I have talked with Chancellor Meyer about, and with Chancellor Schmidt, even though the Eau Claire campus has responsibilities for that, and they are the largest transfer institution to Eau Claire. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. The most number of students who transfer from Rice Lake go to Eau Claire, so that was one of the deciding factors and had a lot of influence on this. But I also realize that Chancellor Meyer has a lengthy association with the Wisconsin Indian Head Technical College, which is adjacent to that campus. And there are a lot of opportunities for collaboration and partnership. And I believe those can still happen, Nelu. I really do. Chancellor Meyer and Chancellor Schmidt work well together, and I believe there's room for them to expand that partnership between Stout and Wisconsin Indian Head Technical College through and in collaboration with Rice Lake campus.
Thank you.
Well, I've got a bunch of reporters waiting for me, so thanks everybody, and please feel free to use the web page. I'll give it to you again. Pardon?
We'll email it.
You're going to email it to them? Okay, never mind. I don't have to repeat it. You're going to get it emailed to you, I was just told. One more question? Any more?
Yeah, this is Matt from Marathon County again. I know Marathon County has a pretty strong international program, as do many of the other two-year colleges. I was away from the call for a minute, so I don't know if this has been asked. What do you see the role of those programs in this new system? Will they be brought into the four-year campus, or will the two-year branch school still have some autonomy on their international programs?
I think that's yet to be determined. I would think that there are some good arguments to make that you could leverage that autonomy nicely with the parent institution. I don't know that to be true in every case, so it would be hard for me to define that, but I believe that's an issue that Marathon needs to bring up with Stevens Point. Hey, how should we do this? What's the best way? Stevens Point is going to want you to be successful at that. There's no question. That's increasingly important, given especially given the demographics in the Stevens Point, Wausau region, Schofield, etc. That is, international students will be even more important, Matt, in the future. Well, thanks everyone. Appreciate you taking the time to do this. I hope you will help share this information with those around you, that you will help others understand what we're trying to do, and that at this phase, there are a lot of things that have to be answered yet. but we've got to take care of students now. We will do our best to be fair, reasonable, and equitable, and we'll work hard at it. So thanks for taking the time to do this, and please share your questions. Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.